So this time around, let's try changing our fetch request that we're making in JavaScript from a get to a post. And let's actually send all of our form data that we're going to need, including our start and end date. And let's also generalize our custom function in our JavaScript module. It's a fair bit to do, but none of it is terribly difficult. So let's get started. So to start with, I am going to go over to my roots file, which is right here. And I will change search availability from a get to a post. So that was easy. Now it's a post request. But there's a bit more work to do here. So let's go over to our generals page and look at our HTML. So right now, I'm at this point, I'm creating my fetch request and sending it as a get. And we need to make that an actual post, which isn't that hard. So first thing we're going to do is look at the HTML we're sending. Well, we have a form. And that form has an input here, which is start, an input here, which is an end. It doesn't have our CSRF token, so we're going to have to add that somewhere. And I could put it right in the form, but I'm not going to. And we also need to change the way that we're calling our fetch. So let's think about this. First of all, that form has an ID. So I'm going to get that form, and I'm going to store it in a variable. So let, and I'll just call it form, equal document, get element by ID, and what's the ID of this form? It is right up here. Let's copy that so I don't make any typos and paste it in here. Now I have a reference to that form. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to programmatically create form data, exactly the kind of data or exactly the kind of information that is sent in a post request. And fortunately, JavaScript has a nice little function for doing that, which it goes like this. Let, and I'll call it form data, equal a new, and the JavaScript type is called, not surprisingly, form data. And that will actually take an argument. And the argument I can pass it is the reference to the form I want to get the data from, which I stored in a variable form. So what I've done with those two lines of code, the first one is I got the form and I stored a reference to it in a variable. And here, in the second one, I created a form data variable that contains all of the elements, all of the inputs from the form that I stored in that variable named as form. So now I have exactly what I need to post with one exception. I don't have my CSRF token. Now, as I said, I could have gone up here, created a hidden input, and that would work just fine. But there's another way. I can append into that form data variable. I can just say form data dot append. And what do I want to append? Well, I want to append something exactly as it would appear in a form input. So it has a name, and it needs to be called CSRF underscore token, and it has to have a value. And I'm going to just pull that right out of the data that I pass to every one of my Golang templates. So in double curly quotes, dot, and the name that is in my template data object is CSRF token. And there, I've now appended that to it. So all I need to do now is to change this fetch request from a get to a post. Well, that actually will take two arguments. So I can put a comma here, and then in curly brackets, I can construct what I want to add to it. And what I want to change it to is from its default method of get to method post. And I want to append in there the body of the request, which is going to be my form data. And with that little change, what I have done, in essence, is convert my fetch from a get to a post, and I've included all the information I want to post, to send along in that post with my form data. So that will have my start, my end, and the one I manually appended, my CSRF token. CSRF token, yeah, I spelled that right. So let's save this. Let's open our terminal. Stop the application just to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to, because I changed my get to a post in my root, so if I don't do this, it's not going to work. Start it up. It compiles. Let's go over to our web browser, reload the page, clear the console, and try checking availability. So my start's the 17th, my end is the 18th, and there they are, the 17th and the 18th, and I click OK. And it worked. It called it, it posted it, it included the CSRF token. That is great. Now the last thing I want to do, in the last lecture I mentioned over here in my base layout that this function, my function called custom, it is not exactly generalized. It's only good if I'm posting information that has the start and the end, and that's not helpful at all. So what I'm going to do instead is, look at this. I'm going to copy will open out of there, exactly as it exists. I'm going to go over to Generals page, and the part where I actually make the call to attention, I'm going to, just before the callback and after the title, I'm going to paste that right in there. And what I'm doing is specifying as part of my constructor my will open logic. Then I'll go back to my base layout, and I'm going to delete all this stuff, and just going to say, just like I did down here, where I say, if callback is not equal to undefined, then run callback. Here I'm going to say, if will open is not equal, sorry, if c.will_open, and no parentheses, is not exactly equal to undefined, in other words, if it's specified when I make the call to this function, then execute c.will_open. Which will work. That should work just fine, because back over here on the generals page, all I'm doing, I could have used this as an anonymous function, but this is just another syntax to do exactly the same thing. I'm specifying will open is set to this function, and that's being passed over to my, my prompt function custom. So I've done it with will open. I could do the same thing with did open. I can copy this, go back over to my roots file, not my roots file, my generals page, and paste it down, where is it here? This is on base layout. I want to go to generals page. There it is. And I can put it anywhere, but I'll put it right here. Did open. Exactly the same logic, but it has to have a comma after it, of course. Otherwise, I'm going to get a JavaScript error because I have this and this. Will open is being passed a function. Did open is being passed a function. So that works just fine. And I can go back to base layout, delete these lines, and use exactly the same logic. And just say, if c.didOpen, with no parentheses, is not exactly equal to undefined, then call c.didOpen. And that should work. So let's save this, make sure everything's saved, go back over to our JavaScript or our web browser, reload the page, clear the console, put some dates in there, so 23 and 24. There, I've got 23 and 24. Click OK, and it worked just fine. So now I have a truly useful function that I can call anywhere, pass anything I want for the contents, and just by writing HTML and storing it in a JavaScript variable. And I can also specify what I want to happen on will open, pre-confirm, did open, anything I want to. I can do that. I'm not doing it with pre-confirm right now, but I could do exactly the same thing. Since we're not using that, why don't we do exactly, we just leave that as, I'll just leave it alone. It's not hurting anything right now because we're not calling it. But the logic is, if I wanted to make pre-confirm something I can override when I call the custom function, then I can use exactly the same logic. Just put an if statement in here and you're good to go. So there, now we know how to post. We know how to post to AJAX. We know how to send a GET request to AJAX, and we know how to handle the response that we're sending back. So in the next lecture, we need to look at server-side validation. We have some great client-side validation for some of our forms, but there's none actually working at all on this form. I can submit that, and it works just fine. It says, okay, you sent no dates, but there's no client-side JavaScript validation. Now, I could add that manually. It would be a kind of a chore to do it. Since I'm doing my send of the data using AJAX, and that's very fast, I don't have to load the entire page over again, I'm going to do my validation for that form, and indeed for all of our forms as time goes on the server side. And we'll get started on that in the next lecture.